Welcome to the RevOps Lab, a podcast exploring the art and science of revenue operations. To find more episodes and resources on scaling your revenue engine, visit getweflow.com/RevOps. This episode is brought to you by Weflow, the easiest way to automate Salesforce data capture. Are you tired of chasing reps for clean CRM data? Weflow auto-captures emails, meetings, and contacts from Google or Microsoft, maps them to the right records, and stores them in Salesforce permanently. Our A9 note taker transcribes meetings, populates fields across any Salesforce object, and syncs everything, including AI summaries and transcripts, back to Salesforce. So you stay in control and your pipeline stays clean. That's what RevOps teams at Plec, Quota, ID Now, and many more love about Weflow. Start your free 14-day trial with a quick intro call at getweflow.com today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevOps Lab podcast. I'm here with Philip, and our guest today is Sarabeth Scott. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, it's a mouthful.
No, I'm really bad with names, so great to have you on. I think we first saw you at RevOps AF in San Diego, where you did a great panel with Hillary from Insight Partners on metrics and board reporting. And actually today we wanted to talk about that exact topic. I mean, you've been a VP at Camunda, Tether, Talkwalker, Upkeep, right? It's like you have a lot of experience, and you recently joined a private equity company. So maybe tell us a bit more about that role, and then we dive in and do basically board reporting best practices today, which is going to be a lot of metrics and why they matter. So I think it's going to be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you being here and following your journey for a number of years. So I am super excited to be here. But I just made the switch from being an operator and kind of jumped over to the investment side. And Camber is a growth equity company. So we are a little bit of a mix between venture and PE. We're really focused on companies, and the investment profile that we originally targeted were very PLG heavy companies that had opportunity to grow and scale even more with, kind of adding that sales motion on top. So my role is net new to the organization. And I'm working with our portfolio companies to kind of spend time on their sales teams and efficiency and CRM, kind of like how they're supporting the whole process and that's growing from just sales, but all the way across the funnel into RevOps. So that is the switch that I've recently made, and it's been an interesting one. It's really an interesting thing to move from being an operator to not being an operator. So I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah. I can very much relate to it. I spent some time in VC, and definitely like operating a lot. So it's not every day, not every hour, I must say, as we all feel sometimes, right?
Yes.
Like, especially not. I mean, I think this like board reporting topic is obviously top of mind. I remember at the last RevOps AF, I actually, met someone, and she was there taking holidays from Israel. Also very well known in RevOps, and she was basically saying, "Oh, actually, I'm at a conference that I booked privately, but my CEO just called me and needs the board reporting pack until Sunday, end of day in a week." I think we've all like in RevOps have had these experiences, right? Like, and so I mean, I think we talked about board reporting with John McMahon, right? He's been on various boards. And today, what we want to do is really like a deep dive around like what are some of those board metrics and how should you think about kind of the core frameworks, right? So maybe let's start with like kind of the framework, right? Like how do you think about board reporting metrics in general, and then let's maybe dive into the specifics like sales, marketing, customer success. Yeah.
Sure. So generally, overall, I've been involved in preparing board decks for many years in many different companies. RevOps usually takes a good, either the lead or has a very, kind of big part in producing that information. The couple things that I found generally, one, you got to stick to a format that the board will expect. So very consistency, every board meeting is really critical, so that they know what they're going to see, and when they look back, they have a way to compare. Really, like, the opportunity in the board is like you may have a different narrative for every meeting, depending on what story you want to tell or what strategy you're employing and how the numbers support that. And you can do that with narrative and the different things that you call out, but the metrics should largely be the same and consistently reported every meeting. So that's thing one. And thing two that I've kind of recently come into as I've been thinking through how to build out what the board reporting, kind of the customer journey or go-to-market holistically board reporting looks like for our portfolio companies, because we're trying to put some standardization and make it easier for them to report to the board in a consistent way. And so as I started to think about, okay, what is the framework that we can put together here? I was like, let's stick to the basics. These are smaller. The companies that we work with at Camber are smaller, less sophisticated. Well, they're kind of earlier stage. You shouldn't say sophistication or not. They're kind of at their early side of growing a sales team. And so their sales organizations are usually smaller. But we also need to pay attention to the PLG metrics and how those things play together. So the thing that I was thinking about is how can we do this in a way that drives consistency, but that when we roll it out to teams, they understand why, kind of the purpose of it. And so I ended up organizing it around different questions that the board typically asks. And so it's kind of like this framework that is like, okay, for the sales team, are we hitting our targets? Well, we want to see a booking versus plans, and so on and so forth. So kind of thinking about like, what are the key questions that the board typically asks when you're talking about the go-to-market function and the efficiency of it.
Yeah, I love it. I think the consistency piece is crucial, and then also the story piece is crucial, as we all know, right? Like the reporting might not even be fully discussed every board meeting, right? Like it might be, 3-4 topics that you want to touch on, right? So that's kind of the story part. But at the same time, as soon as you hit the growth stage, and then if you have PEs involved, they also, even if they don't talk about it 2 hours in the board meeting, they'll look through this in detail. And we work with a bunch of, Vista Act, Vista Partner, and Apex and Euraseo-backed companies as our customers. And, when you see their reporting packs, it's quite extensive. And they do care a lot about it. And I think why this is interesting is because that is actually what really like best looks like from my point of view, because they do have a lot of granular details versus most of the venture capitalists that don't really go as deep, right? So I think you're really in the middle of that. And I think that's super interesting because obviously it can also, right, like it's always in context of like what size are you at and, how many headcounts can you actually devote to just, doing the reporting piece. But maybe we can just walk through the different questions and then talk a bit about like the metrics that you would recommend to look at, because I think that would be super helpful. So maybe we start with sales. What questions are typically being asked, and then we can just walk through that. Yeah.
So I'm sure others will have their opinions and have other questions that they think should be included, but it just kind of starting at the high level, the things that I kind of came up with were, one, are we hitting targets? So super easy. What's your bookings versus plan number? However you want to show that. And then what's your overall quota attainment, and usually like a quota distribution. It depends on how big your sales team obviously is, but understanding how many of your reps, if you have 10 reps or 20 reps or 50 or 100 or 1,000 reps, what's the percentage of quota attainment that each one of those is, kind of banded quota attainment. Will we hit future targets is the next question. And that's all around pipeline generation, pipeline coverage, and forecast accuracy. And the one thing that I would say about pipe coverage is, because you always hear it's 3 to 5x, it's 3 to 5x. I would very much encourage people to really do some thinking and some research around what is normal for the type of business that you're in. If you're selling to SMB businesses and your sales cycles are less than 30 days, pipe coverage means something very different. So then you have to move toward looking at how much of our pipeline do we create and close in a month, and like understanding the historical trends there to give you a better read on, are we pacing to where we need to be? So I say pipe coverage, but I would just issue that word of caution of like, make sure that you're applying the right coverage rates for the type of business that you have and the product that you're selling.
I actually remember this. You had this conversation also on RevOps AF on stage on the pipe coverage, and it definitely left an impression on me, because we also calculate pipe coverage, and we actually changed parts of our product to not highlight 2.5x as like a best practice anymore, but like add like a disclaimer that you need to basically the best way. I mean, curious what you think about it, right? Like, but like, so as a company, you should basically look at, okay, what pipe coverage did you need historically to actually hit your targets, right? And then this is probably like a best practice, and then you should slice, dice it based on different products, geos, however your sales team is operating, however it's set up. But that's essentially then the right approach. And even like a pipeline coverage of 0.9 or 0.8 could theoretically actually be okay if for some magical reason you always like have a team that pulls out like sudden big deals out of some like hidden compartment.
That are probably not in the CRM, or if they are, they're in a fraction. The amount is a fraction of the amount. No, but it's a good point, because like at Camunda, we would always look at our pipe coverage coming into a quarter, and we were never over 2x. And usually it was somewhere between 1.5 and 2x. And that was because, though, we were walking into every quarter with really late stage pipe. So it matters where, because we had much longer sales cycles because we were selling enterprise. And that's why I say all those factors play a role into how you define what good looks like in terms of pipe coverage and pipe gen and kind of pipe progression. So all of those factors need to be applied. And to your point, like all of these metrics that we're talking about, sorry, I'm going to take a sidestep for a minute, is these are the basic metrics, but you can slice and dice these in whatever way is meaningful to the business. So if it's geo, if it's persona, if it's industry, whatever that thing that is driving your business, it's really important. We have one of our portfolio companies that's really, like they're moving up market. So kind of SMB mid-market enterprise is a big thing for them right now, but also the platforms that they connect into. So they're, a tax provider, sales tax provider. And so are they getting business from Shopify, from WooCommerce, from where is that coming? And then that's important to them, so they know where to go. So anyway, I guess too much detail, but the point is that all of these metrics should be applied in whatever kind of matrix that makes sense for your business.
Yeah, got it. I mean, Quota Attainment, I think also like, do you track that against everyone, or only like, do you track when a rep is like fully ramped? Like, do you only include
fully ramped? Quota Attainment is pretty much like you're really only looking at your fully ramped reps, but it's also helpful for the board to understand how many reps you have in seat that are ramping, and what that period looks like, so that you understand, because that goes to another metric that I'm going to get to in a minute, which is kind of what was your planned capacity versus your actual capacity. So every year, we all know, we go through the process of understanding, here's our bookings plan, how many reps do we need to have coverage on that plan, plus a little buffer. And it's great at the beginning of the year, you have your whole thing mapped out. Well, then somebody leaves, or somebody isn't performing well, or whatever it is, or you can't get good reps hired, so you fall behind in a hiring plan. And so the understanding of that dynamic of what your capacity is to what your planned capacity is an important metric. And that is a part of this list for sales. Sorry, I'm jumping around.
Yeah,
No, but
great.
if anyone is interested in that topic, I mean, definitely check out the episode with John McMahon. I mean, we talked about that at length, right? This is especially, I mean, if you scale a MongoDB or Snowflake and you hire hundreds of reps, right? This becomes basically the de facto like Achilles scene. I mean, just really good episode, I think, to recommend. But okay, so we had like, are we hitting targets? Will we hit future targets?
Yep.
What's the third question you think of? Yeah.
The third one is the sales motion efficient? So are we closing business the way that we believe we should be based on historical data and, kind of industry norms? So in that category is your ASP, very simple, your sales cycle, what are your conversion rates? And you can look at conversion rates in terms of from SQO to closed one. You can look at it operationally. You should be looking at the full funnel conversion so you understand where deals are leaking and things like that. But that's much more in the weeds. And for the board, I think an SQO to close one conversion rate gives you a good picture. Some people look at win rates only. I think the two side by side are actually somewhat interesting. So win rate being just of the total number of deals closed, how many were won and how many were lost. But the conversion rate really tells you the quality of the pipe. And then, of course, CAC and CAC payback, which it also shows up in marketing, obviously. So those are kind of the efficiency metrics. Like, again, sticking to the basics. These are all metrics that we've all known forever and ever. And so, it's they're really indicative of how the business is moving, especially when you put it in conjunction with, hey, we really like our goal this year is to move up market. And so because we believe we can have higher ASPs, our sales cycles may be longer. Well, if you start to look at that trend month over month over month, you'll start to see that and combined with what your bookings are in that segment, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. So is the sales motion efficient, right? Like I personally love CAC payback a lot. I think this is actually a great metric.
Hey, Philip here. Are you enjoying this episode? Well, good news, because you can find more free RevOps and go-to-market resources on getweflow.com/RevOps. Access over 20 cheat sheets, reports, and guides that will help you become a better revenue operator. Or join over 2,000 subscribers who already get the latest resources right into their inboxes with our free newsletter. Just go to getweflow.com/RevOps.
What if you think of the sales metrics, right? What are some other questions you're asking yourself?
So the other thing is the team healthy? So this is getting to that capacity versus planning capacity. And then what is your average rep productivity? I've been in businesses where, and that also is kind of in conjunction with your quota attainment. If your overall quota attainment is low, then your overall rep productivity is likely also low. But if you have reps that are, that are performing, if you have at least half of your reps that are performing quite well, it can buoy up the overall rep productivity. But that's a number that I actually wasn't necessarily that tuned into until I got into some of the bigger organizations, Upkeep and Talkwalker, and then Camunda was a big one for us. I mean, our average rep productivity there was over €1 million a year. So it was quite strong. And that brings an interesting dynamic to the conversation around goals with finance when you have that strong of a performance with rep productivity. And so you also I think it's interesting when you look at rep productivity to make sure you're looking at tenure as well.
Yeah.
Those teams.
Like for the rep productivity, do you only look at the financial metric, like output, like sort of like in deals closed one, or do you look at activity metrics as well?
I think you have to look at both. In some companies I've been in, actually in some of the bigger organizations, it's purely just what are they producing in terms of ARR. But I think when you're in a more transactional business, the activity is really critical. Understanding like how many meetings, because you'll know, you have historical data to understand what good looks like for a rep that produces what. They have this many meetings, at least this many opportunities, and that those opportunities close at this rate, and therefore it generates this. And so that's really kind of if you just look at the rep like funnel, if you will, of like they are able to have 5 new prospect meetings a day or whatever it is, especially if they're selling to SMB, like there are easy markers that you can put out there because it can become formulaic to an extent if you have a rep profile that's defined and you know what the activity levels need to be and so on and so forth. So
yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, maybe less like relevant for like the average board meeting, but then at least for middle management.
Operationally, definitely, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, I think we have one more question on the sales side.
Yes. And then this is actually applicable across the board, but are we growing and retaining customers? So that's your GRR and your NRR, which maybe some people wouldn't put that into a sales metrics, but it depends on if an AE is responsible for expansion. That obviously makes it very relevant, but I think it's relevant no matter what or when you're talking about anything go-to-market related. So
It's so important.
You'll see that show up. Yeah, it's so critical.
Yeah, and then I think when you segment it by SMB, mid-market, enterprise, you often see some good surprises, right? Because you might see that smaller companies, at least most often, churn more than larger companies. At least that's the typical pattern most companies see. And then obviously NRR, I mean, I think it's just right. It's really like probably the most beautiful thing in SaaS, right? Like that you can actually just keep growing without adding anyone in theory. And so obviously, if you're above 130, 140, that's just like really, really good. And it shows up in your evaluations. All the investors deeply care about it. Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's kind of become the metric of the last couple of years of NRR. Everyone is focused on land and expand, growing those existing relationships because it's really hard to bring a new customer in. It takes, depending on your business, but it's hard to acquire net new logos. And so the worst thing you can do is lead them or not grow them.
Yeah. I think the last metric on CAC payback I heard was like somewhere between 28 to 32 months. So meaning that you need 28 to 32 months to recoup that investment of acquiring that customer.
Yeah.
Which, right, like is a very long time. Assumes that you basically don't churn them. So if you have a high NRR on those customers, then obviously you reduce that CAC payback quite significantly. But yeah, I think I think these like CAC payback, GRR, NRR, obviously like, booking versus plans, right? Like, I mean, they all matter, right? They all matter like for different layers. If you think about marketing, right? Like I think it's very nice to think about it in questions. What are the questions you think about?
So with marketing, it really comes down to 3 things in my view. Are we generating enough pipeline? And that's relevant whether it's a product-led growth company or a sales-led or a mix of both. And so in terms of that, you look at what are the qualified lead volumes, MQLs, PQLs, a lead velocity rate, which I think is a very fancy term for just looking at qualified lead trends month over month. Like how many leads are we getting in month over month over month?
I actually wanted to ask you what that metric is. I didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, somebody said that to me and I was like, I literally was like, I need to look that up. And then I was like, well, I kind of like the term, but I don't know that it's that widely used. But I know in every business I've been in, we report month over month lead volume trends. So there you go. And then just total marketing source pipeline. And I think, that varies wildly in whatever product you are selling. Those rates will look very different. Okay. And then the second area is pipeline quality. So is the pipeline quality sufficient enough to meet our plan? As you know, this is usually the push and pull between marketing and sales. And so it really is. That is where you'd want to look at MQL and or PQL to SQO conversion, and PQL to SQO. I know it may sound a little strange because it's a product qualified lead that usually closes in self-serve, but there are absolutely many cases where a PQL comes in and then they request sales to be involved. And so you want to make sure that those interactions are adding when you get a salesperson involved, that it's additive and those ASPs are higher. So in companies where you have both motions, PLG and sales led, you need to make sure you're looking at these metrics side by side. Total marketing source bookings, of course. So how did that pipeline convert into bookings? How many new paying customers do you have? And then what's your annual revenue per account, ARPA? Pretty standard stuff.
Yeah. Makes total sense. And like you said, I'm assuming like wildly fluctuating throughout the year.
Yes.
Very hard to get some consistency on. And also okay, right? If you can explain it. I mean, it's always like campaign, like many of these things. Some are like you would expect like a consistent sort of like baseline. And then for others, I would assume you have peaks like or spikes due to like campaigns and like
I was just gonna say, but whatever your marketing calendar looks like will obviously influence a lot of this. But I think that's why it's also there's a lot of value in looking at like, is there seasonality at play? So looking at prior years, comparison to last year, things like that. So
yeah, certainly. And then also like, I mean, like with growth hacking in quotes, right? Like you also like sometimes you have these like new motions, they suddenly like come up and then they're successful for half a year or a year and then less so again. And
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. One more, I think, on the marketing side.
One more is marketing efficient. So then you're right back to your CAC and your CAC payback period and your LTV to CAC. So very standard in the marketing world, in my view.
I have a general question. We talked about sales, we talked about marketing. We're going to talk about customer success. Where do you see like the kind of outbound game? Is that part of sales? Is that part of marketing? Just curious how you think about it.
It depends on where your BDR or SDR team sits. If you have one. I do think, though, it really does belong to be reported in whatever function it sits within. But I think it's relevant for both because marketing, whether it sits in the marketing organization or not, it obviously has a very strong role in supporting that motion. But it is the reps that are doing the outreach. And that to me falls under pipeline generation. So whenever you look at pipeline generation, you want to understand what is the source of that pipeline generation. So that's the only one, not the only one, but one of the only metrics I would really encourage, no matter what, look at the source of that pipeline generation every single time. And honestly, like it's a big factor. We were talking about GRR and NRR and all these metrics. Like it's a really good exercise to go through at least once or twice a year, certainly during planning, to look at what do all of these metrics actually look like across different industries, across different segments. And you'll very quickly be able to kind of use that as a proxy almost to get to an ICP. The number of times I've looked at like all of these metrics, like literally lined up across the different industries that we have been targeting, and the times that we've been like, whoa, we've been targeting this industry and not performing super well. So our retention rates are lower in that industry. Our sales cycles are longer. Our ESPs are lower. Like any one of those metrics that looks off, you need to dig in and understand why. But sorry, I took a major sidestep here, but I think it's relevant. Yeah. So
I think it makes total sense, right? And like you said, I think like all of the metrics that you just mentioned so far, we still have to cover customer success.
Yes, customer success.
But like it always makes sense to look at it like by geo, by industry, segment, whatever, like however you slice and dice your revenue organization. This is also, I guess, how you should slice your KPIs that you report for the board, because like that's what it's for, right? You want to make strategic decisions for different parts of the organization. So That's the only way to
Feels
do it.
almost like we're gonna have to do one on ICP, because I think this is something that is so hard, and like you have so many different, like often so many different ICPs, and then you think this, but then is it backed on real data, and like how do you go about it, right? Like and I think it goes through, like it basically touches so many aspects. But yeah, let's not do it today. Customer success. It's
I'll
just too
stop.
much. This is already really
It is.
dense. So
It absolutely
yes.
does. Right.
Sorry, listeners. This is a dense episode, but I hope you love it. I certainly do. So yeah, customer success. What are the key questions there? Yeah.
First, are we retaining customers? So that's looking at your gross retention rate and then your logo retention. And that's important to have that distinction, because you can replace, you know, someone could churn, or not churn, but they could downgrade, but then they could add a different product and still maintain. And you could, you know, ostensibly. So anyway, the point is that those two things side by side will give you a really good picture of how many customers you are actually retaining. And then secondly is, are we growing those relationships? So what is your NRR? And then what is the expansion revenue rate, or just what is your percentage of expansion bookings and or revenue as a percentage of your beginning ARR, MRR, whatever you're using. And then for any PLG-led companies, is there self-serve expansion, meaning are customers coming back and saying, this is great, I need more. And then the third question are simply, are customers healthy? So hopefully you have a health score of some sort. And so understanding what that health score distribution looks like. So if you look at your customer base and, you know, kind of, if it's just to be super simple about it, red, yellow, green, or whatever those scores are for your business, looking at the number of customers that sit in each one of those is a good indication of how much risk or how well you're doing. And then of course, NPS. I'm a little mixed on how I feel about NPS, but and you know, I know I think it's one of those things that is just there and will forever be there, and you know,
And so easy to hack. So easy to hack.
It is easy to hack, and usually it's like you can put an NPS score up. And this happened in one of our businesses, or one of the businesses I was in. It was like the board asked how many customers responded to give you that NPS score, and it was like a very small percentage of our total customer base. So then it's like,
I've seen NPS implementations where basically like the defining like rules of triggering the survey were like no crash within the last 60 days, no submitted support tickets. Basically just tracking lots of things and only showing the NPS survey if you actually like fall into that category, which automatically,
are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm not going to say who, obviously, but like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so easy to hack.
Gamed. Yeah, you can game it for sure.
Yeah, so it's not just the N, right? Basically, it's like, tell us exactly how you implemented that NPS survey. What is the trigger? Like, yeah. Okay. No, this is great. I really like it. So just to recap, so we covered 3 questions in customer success, 3 questions in marketing, 5 questions in sales. We'll put those questions into our show notes so you can copy and steal them from there. But I think that will help you in any board meeting in the future. And maybe one question from my end, just because this is a RevOps Lab podcast, just your perspective, you know, what's the role of RevOps when it comes to all of these questions? How do you see the role of RevOps, like helping to put these numbers together?
I feel like RevOps is in a uniquely good position to understand these metrics and recognize when there's red and green flags in them. And I think that the ability to take the metrics and put the context of the business around it, or vice versa, putting the context around those metrics is I don't know that there's another place in the organization where you can do that as well as you can from RevOps, because you understand all of the back end the process, what goes into it, how things should be working, what campaigns you're running. Like, you inherently know all the things that are happening to support the go-to-market functions at any given time. And so having all of that contextual knowledge, I think, is sometimes, I remember the first time I was like, I actually know a lot more just from talking to reps. Like, that's one of the biggest things. Like, you got to talk to the people in the field, but also, like, you understand what's happening. You have an engagement with sales leaders, with sales reps, with, customer success managers. You have, RevOps works with all of these people every day. And so having that color commentary around the numbers helps support or bring to life a narrative that maybe other leaders in the organization don't necessarily have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe just a comment to add. So, right, like getting to, like, now we run through a lot of metrics and questions, but like getting to those metrics and being able to actually track them properly and report on them accurately is kind of, right, like is also not
That's
easy. It's just not
no,
easy. So right, like
that's
you have to get to
yeah,
that, and then you have to get to the ability to segment. Because if you can do that, that's almost like a superpower. Because you can go to your CEO, you can go to your CRO and say, hey, look, I analyze, our mid-market business, and I realize that in this industry, we're spending that much for a customer, and we actually spend that much for customer in a different segment. Shouldn't
yes.
we redirect marketing dollars that way, or pipe gen dollars that way? All right. So I think, like,
When
coming up with these, like, strategic insights that
yes.
realistically the others won't see is really a superpower that can help you, grow your career faster and get a seat at the table. Yeah.
100%. And of course, all of that is predicated on the fact that RevOps needs to construct a tech stack and a system and a data structure. The data infrastructure is so critical. And you're hearing a lot of people talk about that now as people want to infuse AI. Like, if your data structure is not sound, you will not gain anything from any of those tools. And so that's thing number one. Is making sure that the systems and the process are set up in a way that are kind of and there's a data structure behind all of that supports getting to these metrics cleanly and easily and accurately. So that's thing one. And then the second part of that, to your point on the superpowers, is like having that contextual knowledge to then bring that to life and see the opportunities that live in that data.
Love it.
Okay. Wise words. Thank you. I think this is a great place to end. As you know, we always ask one final question at the end. What is that? As you know, since 35 minutes ago. The question, as always, like, what is a recommendation for a book or like a show or like a podcast that you would make for our audience?
Yeah, I have been really into Cliff Simon just launched his Lodestar business, or it's Polaris Apps, but he's got a newsletter called the Lodestar, and I read it every time it comes out. And I've watched a number of his podcasts. He's got some really great folks on there. So I love his voice. I love his viewpoint and his vantage point on a lot of things with RevOps. And so he's always been a voice that I've appreciated, and I'm really enjoying his new content. So there you go.
Awesome. We should get him on the show.
We actually had him on the show.
Oh, you had him on.
Yeah. So, but actually, so Philip wasn't there. Right. Philip wasn't there. But Cliff and I, we hang out at different places actually, because he's at a lot of events. No, he's great. I mean, we saw each other at the last RevOps AF, and then here in Berlin actually at an event and so on. So great person to follow for sure. And Sarabeth, thank you so much. This was awesome. Really enjoyed it. And all the best for your new role.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the RevOps Lab podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us, share it with a RevOps friend or drop us a 5-star rating right now. And if you have feedback, questions, or guest ideas, just send a message to Yannis or me on LinkedIn. Thank you, and see you next time.